Assalamualaikum and a very good day everyone. We are from Firm 15, Arief and Partners, and in today's video, we are going to discuss on the application of the jurisprudence theory in discussing the matter of public health emergencies and the limits of the state power. Our firm consists of 4 members, in which me, myself, Farah Aulia binti Ahmad Sanusi, and this video will be continued by Ms. Eng Ziu, Mr. Lukman Arief, as well as Ms. Adelia Safia. But before we start, let's watch a video to kick off our discussion.
Malaysia is reimposing a full lockdown on Kuala Lumpur and 5 states to curb a third wave of COVID-19. The 2-week lockdown begins on Wednesday.
Our healthcare system is at a breaking point. Saya ingin jelaskan realiti situasi sistem kesihatan yang sedang kita hadapi sekarang. Stay at home.
If we were to think back to the moment the world stopped, lockdowns, mandatory masks, closed borders, when a global health emergency hits, the invisible threat forces the government's hand, dramatically expanding the scope of state powers in which we haven't seen in generations. The law, which usually operates to protect our freedoms, suddenly becomes the tool of constraint. Our topic today is one of the most compelling and controversial areas in contemporary jurisprudence, which is the public health emergencies and the limits of state power. We are asking, how far can the state go in the name of public safety before it infringes upon fundamental rights like bodily autonomy, freedom of movement, and economic liability? So, let's see. We are going to dissect the legal philosophies that attempt to answer this crucial question.
Greetings, my name is Eng Ziu with matrix number 290892. I'll be discussing how historical theories help us understand the expansion and limits of state power in Malaysia during the public health emergencies. Malaysia's public health governance can be explained through colonial legitimization theory. Centralized public health powers stem from historical continuities rather than deliberate modern rights-based design. Under British rule, health regulations serve economic interests, legitimize strong executive control via quarantine and movement restrictions. Over time, such laws gain authority through long-standing practice and social acceptance. This legacy persists in modern Malaysia. The federal constitution's allocations of health as a federal matter and the broad discretionary powers under Act 341 reflects the tradition, prioritizing administration efficiency and collective security over individual rights. Public health measures are exercised as state police power, not as constitutional rights, making restriction on civil liberties legally and socially tolerated. While historical theory explains the origin and acceptance of these power, it doesn't justify the alignment with contemporary constitutional and human rights standards, highlighting its key limitations. A second historical concept is the rapture effect, which explains how emergency powers, once exercised, rarely return to their pre-crisis limits, creating a higher baseline of state authority. In Malaysia, Act 342 reflects this, consolidating colonial emergency-style health powers into a permanent federal statute and granting the Director General of Health broad regulatory authority. During COVID-19, movement control orders under Section 11 bypassed full parliamentary scrutiny, normalizing extensive restriction of liberty. Judicial and professional interventions adjusted penalties but did not challenge executive authority. The result was the permanent expansion of the state power, illustrating the rapture effect in Malaysia's public health law. In conclusion, historical theories explain why Malaysia's public health law enables swift and centralized action. However, they also reveal a key legal risk. Temporary emergency power may become normalized, especially in the absence of an explicit constitutional right to health. Recognizing this pattern is essential to ensuring that emergency powers remain exceptional, proportionate, and time-limited.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Adelia Safia binti Asrin with number 290766. I'll talk about sociological theory in regards to public health emergency and the limit of state powers. In the field of sociological jurisprudence, refer to the study of law relation to social behavior and social problems. It examines how legal rules operate within the society. To begin with, Glupk conjuring argued that law exists primarily to promote and protect the social interests of the community. According to Jering, the purpose of law is not simply to abstract ideals of justice, but to preserve the essential conditions of social life through the organized authority of the state. He stressed that social order is maintained through the state power of external compulsion. For Jering, coercion is not just force used against people, but the tools that the state used to protect society's safety and stability. Next level. Members saw law as a part of a broader system of social action, where people obey rules because they believe those rules are legitimate. He described law as a rule of conduct backed by a coercive apparatus, meaning legal rules are different from custom because the state is prepared to enforce them. Weber also highlighted the idea of legal rational authority, which rely on formal rules, clear procedures, and organized bureaucracy. For Weber, modern legal systems are legitimate because they operate in a predictable structure and efficient way. Furthermore, Jürgen Erlich introduced the concept of living law. Erlich believed that the living law is the rules and norms people actually follow in their daily interaction, which creates the true foundation of legal development. Erlich argued that people understand their rights through social relationship, not through abstract legal propositions. Although this state enacts legal mainly to protect and reinforce norms that already exist in society. Lastly, Roscoe view law as a tool for social engineering. He believed that law should help society run smoothly by balancing the different interests that people and groups have. Pound explained that society contains individual interests, public interests, and social interests, and the role of law is to manage its competing demands with as little friction as possible. He believed that law is not just a set of rigid rules, but a practical instrument for maintaining social order and promoting the welfare of the community. This means that judges and lawmakers must consider the social impact of legal decisions and aim to achieve the greatest overall benefit for society. So, in applying Jerry's idea, state coercion during an emergency is justified when it is genuinely to protect the social interests of the community. Early phases of the MCO were largely accepted by the community because society recognized the need to prevent the widespread infection of the virus. However, Jerry also shows that coercion has its limit. If the restriction imposed by the state become excessive, burdensome, or no longer serve as various social purposes, public support for the restriction weakens. This mirrors finding about Malaysia pandemic response, where prolonged lockdown created significant economic and emotional strains. Once coercion no longer produces social benefit, its legitimacy diminishes. Next, Weber's concept of legal rational authority further explained that emergency powers must remain grounded in predictable procedures, clear rules, and consistent communication. People will comply with the law when they view the rules on its rationality and whether it is properly administered. Issues that arose during the movement control orders, such as inconsistent standard of operation, unclear announcement of sudden policy changes, as weakened the legitimacy and reduced compliance with the rule. Thus, Weber demonstrated that procedural clarity and bureaucratic rationality act as natural limits on how far the state can effectively exercise emergency powers. We look further at English living law. English living law further highlight another practical limit. Legal rules can only function when they are aligned with the norms, habits, and social practice of the community. So, even if the state imposed strict regulation, they could not succeed unless the public accept them. For example, compliance with the quarantine or vaccination policies depends on social trust, economic capacity, and shared understanding within the community. When legal obligation conflict with the everyday realities of the community, such as income needs, English explained that enforcement becomes difficult and state power becomes limited by the society behavior itself. Finally, Roscoe theory of social engineering emphasized that the state must balance the individual interests, public interests, and social interests when imposing emergency measures. This is reflected in our coordinated measures, where movement restriction, border controls, and centralized decision-making was implemented in to protect the public health or social interests. However, these measures created uneven balance, especially on vulnerable groups such as youth, workers, and generated social and economic stigmas. This supports Pound's view that legal measures must consider the social effect and avoid imposing unnecessary action. Lastly, I'll talk about the contribution and progress of sociological jurisprudence towards the need of state authorities. Sociological jurisprudence also has important limitations. When the theory relies heavily on social behavior and acceptance, it does not provide clear boundaries on how far the state may restrict individuals' rights. Concepts such as social interests and public welfare are broad and can be treated differently by the authorities. Weber's emphasis on accuracy, feasibility, and applicability inconsistency, while English reliance on changing social norms make legal effectiveness unpredictable. The theory also does not adequately address structural inequalities such as the excessive burdens faced by the movement laws during the movements. In short, sociological jurisprudence help to explain the practical limits of the state powers during the crisis, but does not really define the legal limits, making it more interpretative than prescriptive.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Arief bin Azhar with the matrix number 295303, and I will be explaining on the concept of realism in public health emergencies and limits of state powers. Now, going first, which is what is realism in public health emergencies? Now, to answer that question, we need to understand what are public health emergencies. Public health emergencies are pandemics, outbreaks, and crises, much like the global pandemic, COVID-19. Now, realism is an approach that embraces what is, not just what it should be. So, when applied to public health emergencies, realism recognizes that governments operate under limited time, information, and resources. Therefore, realism provides immediate decisions under such uncertainty. Now, balancing an economic health costs, because realism also recognizes that states have limited resources, meaning limited workforce, limited enforcement capacity, and medical supply. Therefore, realism works best in administrating public health emergencies because it helps the government to make decisions based on the reality of the situation. Now, realism is not to be confused with idealism, because realism is the state does what is possible, not always what is ideal, as compared to idealism, which assumes the state should make decisions purely based on scientific principles, ethical forms, and the greater good, meaning to say that the state does what should be done in a perfect world. Now, in an imperfect setting, realism will always triumph over idealism. The application of realism in public health emergencies and limitations of state powers in Malaysia can be seen through the Movement Control Order, MCO, which happened in COVID-19. While Malaysia implemented phased MCOs and targeted EMCOs that varied by time and severity, rather than a single uniform MCO throughout the whole country. Now, this phase shows that policymakers always adjusting the measures to epidemiology, health capacity, and socio-economic realities as opposed to just one single idea. Now, realism is not without its contribution and drawbacks. And in the context of public health emergencies and limits of state powers, the contributions of realism can be clarified onto why states expand their power during such crises. And also, realism helps highlight why uniform national policies often fail. Now, as for the drawbacks of realism to public health emergencies and the limits of state power, the concept of realism, when applied ostensibly, may undermine trust in the public if it is overused. Another drawback of realism is also that it overemphasizes state interest over individual rights.